Hey beautiful creatures, I'm Amithia, your curator of deliciously dark pages, and I'm so glad you're here. We are back with the continuation of the books from the first half of the year. If you haven't watched the first video, it's up before this one, hopefully. Who knows, with the chaotic way in which I edit. But if this is your first video, know that for the first half of 2025, I took a break from recording because I was dealing with a complicated housing situation. And now I am back and I am desperately trying to catch up so that we can all be on the same page. Because I have read so many beautiful books and I can't tell you about them yet because we haven't even gotten through the first half of the year. So I am going to be uploading videos covering 2 months worth of reading until we catch up to the current one. Hopefully we will smash it out of the park today. The sunshine is on my side. Might be a good omen. So let's get on with the ride. We are at March. March was a tiny reading month for me because I was busy sorting out housing stuff and too stressed to focus, really. So we had 2 books that I have a lot to say about. So first, we have the God of War, the final book in the Legacy of God series. And this was eagerly anticipated because in earlier videos, you may see that when I've read the Legacy of God series originally, it was at a time where I was just like along for the ride, where I could just enjoy it. And so I was really looking forward to the wrapping up of this series and hoping that more would be given in terms of like the secret societies and the rivalries and the behind everything that's happening in the background of that series, which there was quite a lot. However, God of War was a disappointment to me. But before I get into that, let me tell you a little bit of what it's about. So we follow Ava and Eli. Ava is a party girl known in her group for being kind of reckless. And you kind of get the impression that she's running from something or hiding from something. And she's kind of hard to read in that you never really know what's going on because she's too busy partying and on to the next adventure, right? So that is Ava. And then we have Eli, who is a arrogant, entitled, rich guy who is very, very possessive. And they've both kind of been obsessed with each other throughout the whole series of connected standalones. And you kind of see them butt heads over and over again. And he kind of catches her when she's in risky situations. And they do things to spite each other throughout the series. So in Eli and Ava's book, might be quite excited to see what they get up to. Now, the blurb tells us that Ava gets into an accident and her memory is wiped. And when she wakes up 2 years from that point, her and Eli are married and apparently in a loving, committed relationship. And she has memories from university where they were at each other's throats the entire time, where they were doing things to spite each other constantly, where they were stoking each other's jealousy over and over. And so she has no idea, no connection of how we got from loathing each other to now being in a loving, seemingly perfect marriage of all things, right? And so it kind of, the story starts with her losing her memory and Eli taking care of her. Now, from this point, there will be spoilers. So skip ahead if you don't want them. But I have so much to say. Okay, because in Eli and Ava's romance, it turns out that Ava has mental health challenges that she lives with and wants to overcome, but it's built this like deep fear in her that she is inadequate or too much or needs to prove her worth constantly over and over. And so you kind of see her battling with that kind of self-esteem and self-image issue throughout the whole book. Now, she is an accomplished celloist, and you kind of see that being like a steadying or expressive component throughout the whole book, which is beautiful because music is gorgeous medicine. Eli, on the other hand, I am bored throughout the entire book, because it's revealed that he has his own mental health issues that he manages and becomes a key component of their relationship in terms of how they manage each other, right? And he is a very rich, very entitled, will get his own way, hell or high water kind of person, right? And throughout the book, he's incredibly possessive. He threatens people and is violent if anybody so much as looks at her in a form of attractive way. And like, there was nothing else to his character other than entitled rich guy, possessive asshole, doing things that were not moral, right? And throughout this, it turns out that Eli has stepped into the role of being Ava's carer because her mental health needs quite high management. Now, he manages her mental health without her knowing, without her consent to anything he does, and in more progressively restrictive ways that cause deep, deep distress. And you see that escalate throughout the whole book. To the point of her entering psychosis, to the point of her doing things to harm herself or other people, all because she has this feeling that things are going on in the background that she has no say over, and kind of this increasing feeling that she's in a gilded cage, essentially. And that creates a psychological break, right? So there are these like increasingly risky situations that could have been completely avoided if she was clued in on what was happening about her care, if she was given any kind of choice in the scenario at all. It could have all been avoided with clear communication, with involving her in her own damn care, with giving her choices about how her life is lived. And so I could not forgive Eli any of this. And at the end of the book, I was like, Ava, no, you deserve so much better. So much better. Oh my goddess. And so in that sense, it felt like there was really no character growth even, because she went from feeling helpless and not independent to being like, well, he knows best. And just being obsessed with him over and over, despite the fact that aside from those two characteristics of rich guy, entitled, control freak, there was like nothing to his character. So I was like, Ava, who are you even in love with aside from somebody who's actively harming you? So I wanted so much better from her. I wanted him to go and gain some empathy, but I wanted so much better for Ava. And I stayed with the whole book because I wanted her to be able to exert some agency, to kind of bite back in like meaningful ways that create change in their dynamic. And it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. I thought the one thing was the amnesia trope was written quite well, in that there was an element of suspense because you didn't quite know why she was in the situation. You didn't quite know the extent of the traumatic situation she'd gone through. You didn't know who was involved. You didn't know what happened. Right? So that was quite interesting in how that unfolded. But aside from that, no. So I read this book across a couple of days, but I ended it in a cafe, and all I wrote in the front before I gifted it to the reading community to enjoy was, hey, if you want accountability, don't bother reading this. If you want a car crash of a book, feel free. And I stand by that review like so hard. I found this so frustrating because if you gave her a modicum of agency, most of the trauma in this book that happened could have been avoided completely. So yeah. And this kind of got me questioning Rina Kent as a complete author. I don't think I can pick up a Rina Kent again after this book, because mental health was handled so poorly. So poorly. And there was such little character development. And again, I don't forgive that ending of Ava being like, well, he stood through with me throughout all of the hardships that he caused. No, absolutely not. So I am now like boycotting Rina Kent essentially, because that was handled so poorly. And that's where I stand, which is such a flip, because when I read the rest of the Legacy of God series, I was along for the ride. I was chilling, not thinking too deeply, and blessed past me, because I doubt mental health was handled well then either. So me and Rina Kent are no longer besties. I shall not be returning to any of her books ever again in my life. Oh my goddess, no. God of War was so frustrating, and I did end up really hate reading it, because I was just there for Ava being like, you deserve so much better. Please get into a healthy relationship where you are valued and your choices are honored. Goddess, not for me. So that was God of War, which did take me pretty much half the month to read. Okay, next though, we had Wrath of an Exile by Monty J. Now, Monty J has become a ride or die author for me. They write beautifully. They write stories that honor the characters really well. Like, all of the characters' choices make sense for who the character is. All of the endings make sense for the characters and who they are as people, and what makes them and what choices they would actually make, right? They don't do happy endings just because that's a neat bow, you know what I mean? Like, the endings always honor the characters, and that's really gorgeous. Now, Wrath of an Exile follows Fee and Jude. You are told right off the bat that Fee went through a traumatic experience that's really shaped who she is as a person, that's created so much distance between her and her family. They adore each other, but their communication is so rocky and so much distance between them, and Fee feels like a disappointment. And so she's railing against being in this small town that hates her family, that hates her name, that expects her to be nothing really, to not really live up to any potential, because she is academically gifted, but that's not honored in the town as a main part of her personality. It's more like the recklessness or the viciousness or the biting back, kind of up for a challenge all the time, up for a fight kind of persona that she has as a public front. So that's kind of Fee's story, figuring out what she wants to do with her life, how she wants to kind of move forward from this traumatic event, and how she can like reconcile knowing her family loves her, knowing people love her, but not feeling like enough after this traumatic event, right? So that's kind of Fee's story as she goes through. And then we have Jude, who similarly, but from a very different perspective, this town hates his family because his family were in charge of a criminal syndicate that decimated the town and caused so much harm to so many people. And so he's seen as this outcast of the town because of his family name. And it kind of becomes forced proximity because Jude is in a position where, in order to get access to his trust fund, he needs to be of a certain age, and I think have gone through school. So he ends up being taken in by Fee's family in a kind of voluntary temporary adoption situation so that he can get through school and have food on the table and kind of get through the town, basically. And Jude is this standoffish, closed off, hard to read person because this town has just consistently told him he's nothing, he's worthless, he will amount to nothing, and treated him like less than the gum on that shoe. And so his walls are incredibly high, he's incredibly reserved, and he's angry at the whole damn world for being thrust into taking responsibility for a situation that he had no part in. He was a child who didn't know anything about what was going on. Jude and Fee meet at a stormy tower and have a moment of connection, and they found peace in each other's company, only to find the next day who they are to each other, that their families hate each other, that there's this massive rivalry. It's kind of Romeo and Juliet-esque in the sense of how we're gonna get around these huge family feuds. But the book itself is so much more than that. I know that's already a lot of content, but the book really delves into who these people are as people and what it takes to feel like you're enough in your own body and that you are in charge of your own destiny, and reckoning with even existing. What is existence? With these characters, such very different ways of approaching the world. Fee enjoys like logics and Jude is a poet, right? And so these two characters who are opposites in their effect absolutely collide over and over, and it's beautiful. They're coming together. There's so many important conversations. There's so much of what being held actually looks like. There's kind of fighting the attraction initially and being actual enemies because of their family feud. There are so many layers to this book, but it's so beautiful and it's so real, and each character is given the weight of each moment that they deserve. So it's really beautiful. In terms of the plot is very character driven, which I really enjoy. I love character driven books. So this really hit for me. Okay, so we have the release of Psychotic Obsession by Leigh Rivers. Now, if you don't know, I adore the Insatiable series by Leigh Rivers. It's got me in a chokehold still. I can't wait to reread it and do a vlog with you guys. And that follows Cade and Stacey and their roller coaster of a life and coming together and falling apart and all these. Now, in that, we have Daddy Tobias Mitchell, who is Cade's father. Now, Daddy Tobias Mitchell is a psychopath. Like, he has been diagnosed. He is currently in an institution because Aria, the person he's obsessed with, him and Aria went through events that led to him being incarcerated because he was such a danger to himself and others, right? So, Psychotic Obsession finally follows Tobias and Aria's story, which you get breadcrumbs of and key moments of through the Insatiable series. But it follows how they are both scientists who are very accomplished in their field, Aria more so, because she's incredibly passionate. And it shows her being an incredibly focused, incredibly ambitious, incredibly knowledgeable boss woman who really gets derailed by Tobias and their insta-lust, toxic, codependent, obsessive love story. And it really shows Tobias's mental health, his intricacies, and how that interacts with him wanting to give this woman the love she deserves. It shows Aria like unraveling through their relationship because Tobias uses manipulation tactics, takes her hostage, like stalks her. They have a whirlwind romance with inordinate amounts of spice in hotel rooms and in workplaces and because they're just insanely attracted to each other. Neither of them can fight it, even though it's not good for either of them. There's scenes where Tobias breaks, where Aria breaks, and it's them both trying to claw their way back to each other. Now, me reading this book, I honestly wanted more. I wanted more of Tobias's realizing what he was doing was harmful, of on page the manipulation he was doing, because we kind of hear about it and we see the effects on Arya, but we don't hear what he's doing or see what he's doing really all that much. We do see Arya dissolve and the impact it has on her, and that's showed very accurately. And the confusion she experiences of, I adore this man and all I can trust is this man's words, versus, you know, that she's a woman of facts and science and intelligence, right? And that reckoning with the impacts of manipulation and abuse versus your own internal locus and thought patterns and behaviors and that have steered you correctly through your entire life, right? And so it's beautiful in the sense that we see how they are incredibly toxic for each other, but they love each other regardless, and the impacts of that. And we see compassion, like, irrespective of damage caused, which is a beautiful scene in itself. Editing Amnesia here to say the scene with Gabriella was so hard to read. Was so hard to read. And learning the background to Luciella's name. My heart has not recovered. But that said, I feel like I did want more from the scene, in that we know in the Insatiable series, Leigh Rivers can write some gross description of torture and the human condition, and we didn't see that in Paige. So again, I kind of wanted more. I'm still not over what happened to Gabriella. So there's that. She still adores him. And there's also a love triangle that happens throughout Psychotic Obsession. So we have Arya and Tobias and their whirlwind romance. And then we have Ewan in the background, who is also Arya's first love. Ewan. I wasn't ready for Ewan. I wasn't ready to fall so in love with him. I wasn't ready. And he was the most steadfast, reliable, understanding, patient, all-in person who was flawed and made mistakes. But damn, I was not ready for Ewan. And this is honestly the first love triangle I've ever read where I was genuinely rooting for everybody for different reasons. So, score 1 for polyamory yet again. You kind of see this love triangle happening, and this kind of beyond belief acceptance of the pull that Tobias and Arya have towards each other. And it's beautiful the way Ewan and Arya interact. I did not know I could be attracted to a guy like that, but Ewan, here for it. Really, really here for it. So that was beautiful. So overall, like, Psychotic Obsession was something I sat down and read in one sitting because it was so eagerly anticipated, and I was so curious to know their story, which we'd been drip fed through the Insatiable series. However, I wanted more. I think it did what it did quite well, but I wanted more. I wanted more content of Tobias and Arya and their interactions with each other. I wanted more build up to the spice. I wanted more of Ewan being the gorgeous man that he is. More of the conversations of, hey, what does it look like to have Tobias in our life? So I just wanted more. And I honestly, I'm not sure if that's because the world is so immersive that I just want more of it, or if the story, I just want it to be a bit more fleshed out. So those are my thoughts on Psychotic Obsession. Apologies, they're very chaotic. My focus is all over today. Okay, next. I read Under Your Scars. I'll put it over here so you can see who it's by. Which is, to me, it felt like a Batman retelling, but make it dark romance. Essentially, we have, I don't even know. See, I've forgotten. Okay, but we have girl who comes to the city, is not very well off, is sick of being in danger in her life. We have rich guy who has, tries to charm her. Oh, she's a secretary in his business. There we go. And she has a boss who's an asshole. Rich guy who owns the business fires him and is like, you're not my personal secretary. And they kind of have a romance happening at work. In the background, there's a serial killer haunting the city who is killing bad guys and has like a distinctive signature and stuff. And they have an interaction, the serial killer and our main secretary woman. She is almost killed. He steps in and saves her, and then he continues to stalk her and invade her home, claim her as his. And there's kind of this like strange love triangle happening throughout as you learn more about the rich guy and how he's a philanthropist and his parents were killed, and it's Batman retelling. And I got the twist so easily. It was very, very predictable. And then later on, there's trafficking that happens. It's just so unnecessarily guttural. I don't feel like there was enough build up in the book. I don't feel like it was done sensitively. I felt like it was there for shock value, and it was just unnecessarily disgusting what happened. Also, we have no faith in his ability to save her. it doesn't make sense the extent that he's upset because there's not been enough build-up between the two of them. Like, when I say this was just there for shock value and it was done in the most insensitive, degrading, disgusting way it could be, and like we're put into this emotionally gross situation with no faith he'll actually save her, with no faith there'll be a good outcome, so there's not even any kind of emotional fail-safe that we have to get through these really, really hard scenes. Unnecessary. And for what? Like, you could have chosen any other crime to have been experienced and it would have done the same thing plot-wise. It would have done the same thing plot-wise. It was not necessary to use that specific thing as a plot device, do it so graphically, and give no, like, lead-up or warning. So it was not worth it. It was not worth it to include that in the book. And so I DNF'd. I stopped reading because it was disgustingly graphic for no reason. For no reason, it felt like. So that was that. I then read a short graphic novel series of Alice Never After, which follows Alice once she's been returned home from a institution. She's still lost in delusion and delirium. It kind of follows her decision on whether or not to come back to the physical realm and why the hell she should when she's surrounded by people who do not have her best interests at heart. And it does it very quickly. The art style is really, really interesting. It does give like agency to Alice and kind of really reflect her inner strength and what goes into that decision of, do I stay in Wonderland or do I come back to the surface? And that was really beautiful in that it showed like that within our mental health recovery journeys we do have agency, and that was awesome. And also like the self-awareness of slowly of who was around her and the harm they were causing and all that kind of stuff. Really beautifully done. Again, was very predictable, especially if you're familiar with the Alice in Wonderland myth at this point. Massive stories to do with it, but it was quick and it did what it wanted to do, and it was a break from the grossness of Undeal Scars. Then I read Where Shadows Meet, which is a mythic fantasy following a vampire goddess, a goddess of death's daughter, and necromancy and immortality, the rising and falling of a kingdom. And it has all the ingredients of things I really, really adore. And it follows somebody who is cursed, somebody who wants to resurrect her vampire lover, and is building their whole life around this, whilst also reckoning with the fact that they may have only been wanted because of an ability that vampire could steal, and reckoning with all of those complicated feelings. Now, this has so many elements that I adore. It has necromancy, it has curses, it has gods and goddesses, it has witches, death deities, it has ghosts who are sentient. It has so many things that I absolutely adore, but the writing style was abysmal to me. It was so clunky, it dragged on, it was not poetical, which is what I felt I needed to bring together the past and the present and all these different overlapping stories. The writing style just really didn't do it for me, so I did DNF it within like the third chapter, which was so disappointing because all the ingredients are things that I adore. So that was Where the Shadows Meet for me. Here we are. We're going to try again. Where Shadows Meet is the next book I read, and it is gorgeous with all of its elements. And let me tell you, all of the gorgeous elements. I'm so excited to have a book. So we have a world where vampires and humans have gone to war. Vampires have won, and we're now living in a world where predatory nature has rules, and there's like a very tentative peace between vampires and humans, right? So we're living in that. It's kind of in a medieval-esque world as well. So you have things like old markets and castles and moats and all these kind of like assassins and knights guards and all that kind of stuff. So that's happening in like one timeline. And we're following a main princess whose best friend is captured during attack and taken to an island of seers that is mythical, who see the future and help it come to pass. And so she goes on like an epic journey to kind of save her best friend with an accomplice of one of those future tellers who are a dying breed, desperately trying to continue their tribe and people, with a very different view of the world, a very different way of doing things to this princess who was raised in a castle and being fed certain information. So that's a really, really interesting dynamic, firstly, and I'm here for it, right? Secondly, in the past, many hundreds of years ago, we have a vampire and a goddess who get into a relationship. The goddess gives up her wings in order to grant the vampire immortal power, and they are deeply, deeply in love, and they defy each other's kingdoms to be together, and so it's incredibly gorgeous. And Favor sacrificed her wings. So she is reckoning this entire time with the grief of losing her wings, losing a part of herself, her relationship with her mother, which is incredibly messy, and that I'm contemplating in the back of her head if this relationship is all a manipulation for the gift that she gave by sacrificing her wings. In the meantime, the vampire queen now is gaining more and more power and is eventually slain, and Favor goes on this mystical magical quest to resurrect the vampire queen to be reunited with her love. And so there's so many themes in this of like manipulation, of betrayal, of complex relationships, loving someone and hating them, vampire monarchies, and the ingredients chef's kiss, adore them. And all the characters, like, everybody has mixed motivations, everybody has such conflicting feelings for the people they're connected to: love, hate, desire, power, greed, all of these kind of beautiful themes. However, sadly for me, the way this was written was so disjointed and the opposite of poetic that I lost patience with it very, very quickly. The different timelines, that differentiation was done really, really well, because all of the characters were written very distinctly with their thought patterns, with their dialects, with their behaviors, right? Awesome. However, it just felt incredibly disjointed to me. It felt like so much was explained rather than shown. And that is a reason that I really struggle with fantasy books, is that often they do exposition. They tell you what's going on instead of showing you in the world, in the behaviors, in the whatever. And so I get quite bored quite quickly, because if I wanted to read something like that, I'd read a textbook, and I never do that. So yeah, unfortunately the writing style was not for me. In May, I read one of my favorite graphic novels ever, my favorite Liza James book, a book that changed my brain chemistry, and a book that again had beautiful components but was a disappointment. So let me tell you what they're all about. So I read The Grimoire Hour, which is a adorable, spooky graphic novel, perfect for spooky season. Grimoire Noir follows Bucky, a 15-year-old son of a sheriff in a small town, and this small town is home to witches. Now, no one in this town is allowed to leave, to keep them safe from the world and to keep the world kind of safe from them. So Bucky's sister goes missing. So we follow Bucky going through the town, trying to do detective work as a 15-year-old. He can do things that his father can't, who is stuck by the law, and it's very important he follows the law so that the treaties in the town stay safe and people follow all the rules. We're kind of in this spooky town that is drawn adorably with a gorgeous color palette where color is used so intentionally, and I adore when this is done in graphic novels. Intentional color usage is even more beautiful and eye-catching against this adorable graphic novel art style. And yet this book pulls at your heartstrings. We have like the sorrow of parents over having a missing child. We have the adoration of the sister being really true. We have suspicion cast at different members of the town, and we're kind of following Bucky, putting the pieces together of all of the things that had to happen exactly the way they were to get the results they wanted. And through this story, we learn about the different tensions in the town, different people's attitudes to the rules, the different setups of powers and different abilities, and Bucky reckoning with this feeling of being an average person without powers, and what that feels like in this town where almost everybody is a witch. I think all the females are witches, and that power dynamic through the town. So it does what it does so well. It's gonna be a dedicated comfort read for me. It's beautiful, it's heartfelt, it's a young person's novel. It's meant for somebody, you know, who's 15, and so it is quite sweet in that way. But I kind of adore things like that, because like children feel so intensely and yet move through emotions so smoothly, or at least from one to the next without lingering. Grimoire Noir does that so well. It really reflects that really well, and I can't wait to like lend it to my fellow spooky season girlies through October and reread it towards the end of the season with a hot chocolate to boot. That is Grimoire Noir. I highly, highly recommend it. Then we have The Madhouse by Liza James. When I tell you, this is such an eagerly anticipated release for me, because Liza James is a queen of dark sapphic romance. She is phenomenal at writing about religious trauma specifically. She often deals in cults, right? She's also phenomenal at having strong female characters in many different variations. So we'll have strong female characters who are really in touch with their emotions, really soft, and really able to put boundaries in. We'll have other female characters who are a little bit dangerous, a little bit authoritative, but still sensual. And then we'll have other characters who are rough and ready and rough and tumble and very physically capable and very physically intimidating, and moves through all those moods. It's flipping seamless, beautiful vibes. And so The Madhouse follows Ophelia and Cedar. Now, both of these characters escape a cult and have very different reactions. Cedar has kind of started building her life for each other, and oh, I buried the lead. Ophelia and Cedar are stepsisters, and they were brought into this cult at very, very young ages and escape at different times. Cedar escapes when she's, I think, around 16. Ophelia when she's much older, after she murders her parents. That is on the blurb, that is not a spoiler. And so Cedar takes Ophelia in because, frankly, there is nobody else, and Cedar is reckoning with building a life where she is overtly like lesbian and queer and living an alternate lifestyle, being a tattooist, against being reminded of her identity as a cult survivor and all of those traumatic memories coming to the surface. Ophelia presents as an incredibly broken person who splits between this very like religiously minded, demure, modest person and someone who is very violent and unpredictable and savage with their tongue. And so, and throughout in the background, while these siblings are exploring a perhaps romantic connection that's going on and battling with those feelings and the taboo nature of that, with all of that going on, there's also this cult really trying to find them because they are dropping like flies and also need to reclaim Ophelia and Cedar back into the cult so that they're not a danger to spilling their secrets or getting them caught or anything messy like that. So there's kind of this like thriller element going through the whole thing of, are they safe? Of like, who wants revenge and how do they want it? Of, is Cedar even safe with Ophelia in the house because she's dealing with this like dual psyche experience of like unpredictability and danger. And so there's so much tension of different varieties. And then you've got like the sexual tension of their budding attraction to each other and like maybe coming to terms with that and struggling with it throughout the book, and that contrasting against their religious trauma. So there's so much that's so deep in this book, and yet there's so much pacing. Liza James is so good at moving you through, especially those thriller aspects, and especially through this tension. And oh my goodness, the spice in these books, phenomenal. True to the characters, realistic, gives time to get to grips with the intensity of what's happening. So hot, so hot. And all of the decisions reflect the characters, which again, I love. Liza James is so good at this. So I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is part of a duet. The second one is not out yet. I refuse to read the last chapter of this book until the next book is released. So I will update you as soon as I can, because better believe I'm gonna get that second book as soon as I can. As soon as I can. Whew. Okay, very excited about Liza James. Bringing the mood down a little bit now. Next, I read Winter Girls by Laurie Halsey Anderson. Now, Winter Girls follows trigger warning for eating disorders ahead. So if you want to skip, you feel free. Protect your health. It's your choice. But it follows Leah, who is someone struggling with anorexia, who has been how do I explain it? So Leah's struggling with anorexia, and the book kind of follows her journey battling with that in the aftermath of her best friend also struggling with a different eating disorder, bulimia, who dies because of her eating disorder. And there's a bit of a mystery element in terms of Leah not really wanting to admit what happened with her best friend, the repercussions of kind of their relationship and kind of the eating disorder tendency to want to one-up each other over and over, and that may have contributed to her best friend's death, and kind of reckoning with the actual events of her best friend's death, what happened, and Leah's relationship to that. And then we've got Leah's journey with the anorexia and it infiltrating every single aspect of her life. It boiling down to the anorexia convincing her that she doesn't deserve to be alive, and kind of getting to grips with what that means in terms of anorexia. And it takes her to some really dark depths. And you kind of see her family dealing with this, and her family having very different approaches to having conversations about this with her. And you get touches of like mental health professionals being mentioned in the book, and the tips and tricks Leah uses to try and manage the ED or mismanager, or however you view that. And it's honestly so utterly heartbreaking to see the way that anorexia manipulates the people experiencing it, and the way that it breaks the body down into something that betrays itself. And that's heartbreaking, right? So reckoning with Leah finding a purpose to live, finding worth in herself, and like moving through this disorder in lots and lots of different ways is heartbreaking to read, but so essential reading, I would say, for anybody who is experiencing eating disorder, if you can keep yourself safe during that read, or for people who are wanting to learn more about eating disorders, or for people who are supporting people with eating disorders, because I think sometimes there can be a frustration of like, hey, you know, this eating disorder is wrecking your life, why can't you just eat or do food in another way, or let me help you, right? There can be a real frustration around why can't you just let me help you. And the representation of the eating disorder in Winter Girls, so accurate, is so accurate and so honest and raw. It really shows everything that gets in the way of just letting somebody help. Whew! So I'd highly recommend it if you are someone who wants to understand eating disorders better, if you're someone who's experiencing eating disorder and wants to face it, but in a third person way, or somebody who's supporting someone with an eating disorder and wants to get an insight into what's going on and maybe how you can help in ways that actually help. I really wouldn't recommend much of the ways that people try and help in this book, because you can see how it backfires. With eating disorders, I'm not a professional in this, but it's a lot about giving people choice and creating safe spaces, you know, being there to reassure and be a voice of reason in whatever way works for that person. And Winter Girls does not show people dealing with the eating disorder in good ways, in helpful ways. So just bear that in mind going in. And it kind of ends in an ambiguous way, which again gives Leah so much choice as to where she goes from here, and kind of leaves it in that way of like asking the question, hey, what are the next steps? What is best? How do we move from this space of like dire straits forward? And how do we keep moving forward, right? Because that's another thing that's tackled through the book. So it's done so well, and I would recommend it to anyone from that previous category I mentioned. So, on a lighter note-ish, because we're still in the era of dark romance, I next read A Perfect World. Now, A Perfect World had so much potential, and the writing style did indeed let me down. If you're someone who can look past writing style, go for it! Let me tell you what it's about, though, why I was so excited to pick it up. So, A Perfect World follows Courtney and Ollie. Now, Courtney can see the future, and she feels plagued by this ability that interrupts her life, and she is going to college, trying to get a fresh start, but is in an abusive relationship that's not really helping her with that in any way, shape, or form. Now, we also have Ollie, who has some telekinetic abilities, I believe, and Courtney and Ollie have a chance encounter in an elevator, and she realizes Ollie is someone she's seen her entire life as a point of comfort. She thought he was a fantasy in her head. Turns out he's real. Holy crap. And so they kind of begin connecting over their abilities and otherness and how they've stayed safe in a world that would destroy them if they found out, or like put them in a lab with da-da-da. And as the book moves, you can kind of see how there might be a government conspiracy happening in the background. And so you kind of know that Courtney has dark secrets and Ollie has dark secrets, and you kind of are introduced to a cast of characters who've also been experiments on throughout the book, and it kind of becomes a bit of a survival thing, and it kind of explores relationships with families who feared them, with families who mistreated them, with families who abandoned them due to their abilities and because they were cruel people, right? Accountability, guys. So you kind of see this beautiful like coming together and getting strength from each other, and I personally adore in how the hell are you going to stay safe in a society where those organizations rule, right? Really interesting to me, because like it's like a giant puzzle of survival, and I love a puzzle of survival rather than a let's camp and do rough stuff. I don't know, I get bored by that. Anyway, so I love that aspect, that thriller aspect, and I was so incredibly excited because I personally love when people can see the future. I personally love when there's kind of that element of almost past life connections or moments of fate where like you're meant to meet and you're meant to have a kind of connection, whatever that may be. I love that aspect. And also for me, the way that Courtney saw the future and the way it interrupted her life, very reminiscent of hallucinations, and I enjoy seeing that representation. So I was so excited for all these ingredients to come together, and I got maybe like 30% of the way through this book because I really pushed through, but the writing style just was not it for me. I could not forgive it. It was too simple. It was written to me similarly to how stuff on Wattpad used to be written, and although like the characters were fleshed out and their motivations were like true to the character, all that stuff was there, but the writing style just was not it for me, and I could not move past it, so I did have to put it down. Maybe I'll try and pick it up in the future because I really do think the premise has so much potential, especially with the cast of characters we're introduced to. So much potential, but I can't get past the writing style. Maybe that improves in the next books. It is a completed series. I think there's like 3 or 4 books. They're all out. So hopefully, if you want to pick the series up, the writing style improves in the next books. But that was A Perfect World. Okay, I am going to pause there because there are 3 months left of books to share with you guys before I've caught up. And we've already been chatting for like 50 minutes. So hopefully you've enjoyed what you've heard about, you've been intrigued. Any questions, pop them below. But I'm more than happy to chat. If you have read these and you have other opinions, let me know what you liked about it, because sometimes I like seeing things from other people's perspective. If there's anything here where you're like, I'm so glad it was released, let me know, because there's nothing like the excitement of like a new release that you've just been looking forward to for months and months and months, and it's finally here and you're like, yes, in the world. If anybody knows when the next bit of the Madhouse duet is going to be released, please pop it below, because I'm so excited. I will run to that book. I will clear my entire day, might not go to work, so I can read it. You know, gonna be obsessed, gonna be absolutely obsessed. Also, videos that are coming up is I'm getting ready to reread the Insatiable series and reread the Haunting Adeline series and do vlogs around them. A, because Insatiable still has a chokehold on me, and I read it in February. In February of this year. We are in October as of me recording this, and it still has a chokehold on me. I still think of it daily. I still want to read it daily, but I want to do a vlog because A, I'm curious if it'll hit, and B, I just want to share the love, really. I just want to share the love. And then Haunting Adeline, I'm going to be doing a vlog on because I suggested it in an online reading group that I'm part of, and somebody hit back with, oh, no, that series is grapey and not cool and all about forcing people to do stuff. And I was like, did we read the same book? Did we? Because I didn't get that vibe. So, yeah, I now need to read it just from pure confusion, really. And also, I listen to Deftones every time I read those books, and so I'm just excited to have like over 8 hours of uninterrupted Deftones. So that vlog will be coming at some point, probably next year now. Maybe sooner. I'm hoping I get back into the swing of recording because I really miss it and I really love chatting to you guys. So, thank you, beautiful creatures, for being here and chilling out with me. I'm so happy to be back. I'm so happy to get more efficient at telling you the blurbs of the stories. We're still improving as we go. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will catch you in the next catch up so soon when we all caught up. I love you. Mwah. Bye.